Major support for these broadcasts is provided by the CUNY TV Foundation, New York Community Bank, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's window company, Capital One Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Geneva Burns, Giantomasi and Webster, M&T Bank, the Wyckoff Group, Chelsea Lighting, Greenberg Traurig, LLP. Additional support is provided by Ackman Ziff Real Estate, AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi, USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Colliers International, NYC, Cushman & Wakefield, DDG, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Eastern Union Funding, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Herrick Feinstein LLP, Hersha Hospitality Trust, Investors Bank, New Banks, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, John Katsimatidis, Red Apple Group, Margolin Weiner and Evans, Madison Realty Capital, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, Popular Community Bank, SJP Properties, Sterling & Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, Urban American, and these friends.
How did generations change? How do you transfer business from one generation to a second generation? How hard is it? Do you want to go into that business? You want to be in that relative business? You want to be in retail? You want to be in financing? You want to be in real estate? I don't know. But I brought together, because I don't have a generation of a business, so I brought together these people who are from different generations of business. Jason Muss, fourth generation of Muss developers in the real estate business. Dan Glickberg, vice president of Fairway Market, fourth generation. Peter Rosenthal, who he says is the fourth generation that you can really consider up to a point, because Grandpa Imrie started the business, which would make him the third, but Imrie's father financed, guaranteed the first loan, so it's the fourth generation, president of Rosenthal and Rosenthal. And last but not least, my friend Paul Rich, who's a principal emeritus at Rothstein Cass, whose specialty is taking care of businesses, taking them to the next generation and transferring them. So when you were growing up, you know, and I know your dad and I know you for many years, did you think that you'd leave anything but, you went to law school, that you were going to go into the business?
No. I thought that it was the way that I was going to go, and that's what happened.
Did your father say, you better go into the business?
Not at all, no. He wasn't like that at all. He let all of us decide for ourselves what to do, and I was fortunate that I made the decision without pressure, and it worked out very well. Now,
you have any other siblings in the business?
Yes.
Your sister and your brother?
We have siblings in the business, absolutely. I have siblings in the business, and it's just a different atmosphere than I guess another company would be. You know, I like the vibe of family business. I like the rapport. I've had an office adjacent to my father's office for 17 years, and it's a great way to learn and a great way to...
He doesn't knock on the door, schnook, schnook, you know.
Luckily, our desks are not on the walls, not on the walls, so there's a little bit of buffer. Right. But we do have a 17-year working relationship. Since the moment I graduated law school, I didn't even really, you know, do much traveling or anything. I really wanted to work, and went right in there.
Which is interesting. When you see businesses, Paul, do you see people go directly from college immediately into the business, or do you see them taking a job sometimes?
I'd say more often than not, a next generation takes a job. They want to go there feeling that they're whole and that their voice will be counted, that their parents often or grandparents will respect what they say, that they will have become much more sophisticated by virtue of being a person of the world first, and then they go into the business. That's most typical. When you hear a story like yours, really, typically you would think, I'm just going to guess and surmise, that you have a wonderful family that has a lot of respect for each other. And it's that kind of feeling that makes you not only want to go there, but can be in the next office for 17 years and speak the way you did about it. And I found the key to family business to be successful, especially going into a next generation, has to do with the relationship within the family itself, and that transcends into the business.
Dan, you were saying prior to the show that you never really thought you'd go into this business. You know, how did it happen? You were at Trinity, you were a journalism major. You know, the last thing that you would think is, hey, I'm going to be here with the coffee and the fishmonger, and you know, I'm going to be taking care of the customers who are saying, what aisle is this in? You know?
Yeah, no, exactly. It was a little bit of a different transition for myself. I was definitely looking into journalism school coming out of college. And then what happened was people would ask me if I was going into the family business. And whenever I was around my father, I could kind of see the look in his eye when people would ask. And I just felt like there was definitely a pull from him to at least give it a shot. And if it didn't work out, I kind of had a fallback plan.
So here's the question. Did you ever ask your dad, did he have any idea that he would always go into the family business? Because he was the third generation. Your great-grandfather started with a fruit stand.
Yep.
And then the next generation finally took the market on the west side. Did your dad always think that he was going to go in the business, or he had?
No, he was a stockbroker for a while. So, and it actually got to the point, my grandfather was not so happy about that. I think he wrote him out of his will at some point. And then, my father came back to the business, and it was a pretty neat thing to watch. My grandfather really started with a bunch of fruit stands running up and down Broadway. He consolidated them all into one fruit and vegetable stand on 74th Street. My grandfather took the small fruit and vegetable stand and turned it into a superette. I guess back then it was like a mini supermarket.
A bodega.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. And then, slowly but surely, my father was able to get these experts in the industry, and he was really able to take that European market feel.
So when did your father go into the business? If he was a stockbroker, how many years was he away from the business, would you say?
I think he started when he was 29, so he was my age. I actually have 7 years of experience at this point. So hopefully I'm a little ahead of where he was.
How do you like working, like Jason was saying, next door to your dad? I mean, I know that, look, what Fairway has done over the last couple of years is, you're one of the highest grossing supermarket chains in the country. I even put that in an article, $1,051 per square foot. Yeah. And, certainly, okay, and everybody, my wife's, when we go out to West Hampton, she has to stop at Plainview, I even told Paul.
Douglaston's a little easier, actually, off the freeway. So
okay, so how is it to work with your dad?
We have our moments, but for the most part, it's good. I think at the end of the day, what's really important when you're working in a family business is that you have somebody there who will watch your back, and that's not necessarily always the case. And whether you have your disagreements or not on a day-to-day basis, at the end of the day, I think that you each have each other's best interests at heart, and that definitely helps you get through, especially when you're coming into a business, third, fourth, fifth generation, whatever it may be, at a young age. It's definitely nice to have a little bit of a safety net, whereas if you're going into a business without your family in it, you might have nobody watching your back.
Let's talk about your family business. I mean, you're in the money business. You're in the finance business. You're the largest private factor in the world, independent factor, and one of the largest finance companies. But you were, you were more of a student, right? You never thought that you were going to be in the family business. Even your dad, who I've known for years, he was in the business, but I don't think your dad was overly enthusiastic of being in the family business, right?
Well, I mean, my father has worked in the business his whole life.
I know, but
and I think, as you said, we're primarily in the factoring and finance business. My father's interests have always been more in the real estate business, which we do as well. For myself, you're right. I mean, I was a history and literature major in college. Really didn't know what I was going to do when I got out.
Your grandfather, as we say, he was short in height, but tall in stature and everything else, and short in comments. Did he ever say, Peter, you're going to join the business?
Never. And my father never really pushed me in that direction. Although when I got out of college, he did encourage me to think about going into the banking business to get into a training program at a bank.
Right, but you did. Didn't you
And I
work for a
did.
chemical bank?
And I did, which maybe that was part of his plan to lead me down a certain path, because I had no background in finance and no real interest in finance at the time. But then I worked at Chemical Bank in their training program, went back to law school, and then joined the business after law school.
And then you went for your master's afterwards.
I did get
You know, you needed another degree.
Well, I did enjoy going to school, it's true.
Okay. But my question is, you know, Jason has, it's really his family. It's your dad's, your brothers and sisters over there. You had a little different. You had cousins.
Yes.
Makes it a totally different type of business, right?
Yes. I have a number of cousins in the business. So yes, it's, you know, it's truly third or fourth generation at that point. It's no longer just siblings. It extends much further. So yes, no, that's true.
How do you see when it's cousins as opposed to, you know, brothers and sisters, Paul?
It's probably the hardest of any transfer. Cousins, for one, might not even be close to each other in many respects. They might have gone to different schools, geographically might not be
Yeah, he went
together.
terrible. You know, how many cousins go to Harvard? You know, combination.
Now, you know, my son is Princeton, and we have this battle
know,
that
I
we had in the
realize
other
that,
room,
right.
but had to throw that in. But and so the focus really has to be that the family first and the business may be second. And if the family's first, then there's a lot of things that you can do to get those cousins together, from I'll call it camps and trips and retreats. To, I know one family that sent all the cousins to Outward Bound so that they would have a survival experience where they had to have each other's back.
Survivor.
Like that, but a little different. The goal is also for the various siblings that now have children who are cousins to have mutual respect for each other, as well as for the legacy of their parents, because otherwise, again, the cousins don't appreciate it. Also because the various cousins have different talents and different interests, to figure out what's fair in terms of who will work and who won't, who might get a dividend or who might not, who, if for some reason, doesn't want to be a member of the organization.
Yeah, but you know, that's a perfect question to relate to you. I mean, you have cousins in different roles.
Yes.
You have one cousin who is like an executive vice president, and you're the president, and you're more in the financing, in the factoring side, and if I remember, Ken's more involved in the asset-based and in the real estate side. How does that get along? And then you have a sister in the business, too, who was in the art business,
Yes.
so which has changed.
Sure. Well, I mean, fortunately for us, I mean, first of all, we all get along really well. We all respect each other. To your point, we're all committed to extending the legacy of the business, and that's really the critical thing, is that you have to put the family first. You can have a wonderful business, but if the family is not working well together, it's going to be difficult to carry that business on. So that's number one. And number two, there are so many different ways to get involved in the business, so many different aspects, and we all have different talents. I'm more of an inside person. I'm more of an analytical mind. I like finance. My cousin, you know, he's a wonderful networker. He really likes to be on the outside. So that works very well together.
Now, your company, as we were talking prior, your father your grandfather had two partners, and they, you know, then your father had three partners basically two partners. So he owned the third, and then one of the partners wanted to move, and he had to buy him out. So they brought in a private equity. So even though it's still a family business, your family owns like 16% of the business. How do you see, and it relates well, I'm going to ask Paul, and it relates well to this. Do you ever see, your company is going to be a publicly held company in a short period of time, right?
I can't comment on
No. The registration, okay, that's what we read in the press, okay? Do you ever foresee, in a manner of the Must Development becoming a REIT? Do you see a Rosenthal and Rosenthal becoming a publicly held company?
No, I don't. And I don't think it's ever been contemplated, certainly not in the time that I've been there. We are very much committed to being private, and we think it's one of our advantages. So I couldn't envision that.
I don't think we'll ever be a REIT. Our product is diverse, and it would be very hard for the markets to understand the fact that we would have a shopping center, an office building,
But you know, some things
residential
that, you know,
tower
and
or something like that.
But some of it
being mixed
relates,
into a
you
REIT
know,
wouldn't
some
work.
of it relates partially, you know, for Dan, you know, it helped them, the private equity helped them grow, okay? Fairway had a couple of stores. Before Sterling came into the deal, you had the store on the west side and you had Harlem, correct?
And Plainview and Brooklyn. Brooklyn had just opened, so
The
really
Red Hook. So you
yeah.
had 5 stores, but the expanded growth came with the private equity over there.
Yes, well, our expansion before, how everything worked was we would open up a store and we would wait to open up the next store until all the debt on the previous store had been paid off. Now what we're able to do, and Sterling is great in the financing world, we're able to open up, you know, 3 or 4 stores a year without having to worry about paying off the debt, even though it's actually coming off quicker than it was before they entered the business. We don't have to worry about paying off the debt on one store before opening up the next.
Here's the question: when you, and you know, if Paul chime in over here, when you have a family business, how much desire is it to grow it to be, you know, to like the expansion that you did over there, you know?
I'm going to say 2 things I'd like to share. Firstly, the way I understand here, your dad had vision and he had ambition and he worked very hard, but his partners just chose another avenue in life. And so without a succession plan, often you might go to private equity or wherever to make sure that you can continue the business. Also, when a family is working hard and they're growing, and they've reached the point where management might be outside of the family, where the opportunities of the world can make the family and the company grow. Often it makes sense to either A, liquefy somewhat, secondly, to take the opportunity to expand and use the outside money to help that business grow. So it's not, even though it's probably less frequent,
I
it
understand,
exists.
but here's an interesting thing. Each one of you have a family business, even though, you know, Sterling is involved. It's a family business, but you have outside people who work for the company. And I know that, you know, basically from the years that I've known Rosenthal, it's a family business, but people who work at the company feel like they're part of the family.
Yes.
Okay? That's the situation, and the same way it must. You've built that feeling that they may not be blood relatives or something, but they're like family. And I think that's the way even at Fairway. There are people who've been there who feel like they're part of that family, okay? You know, like Mike Stanley joined you maybe 15 years ago, Bob Preiser joined you. So how do you keep that, how do you make them feel like a family?
The employees?
The employees.
Well, you know, I think a lot of it just comes from the top. A lot of it is just the atmosphere that's really created by the leader, and I think you can find that type of atmosphere even in businesses that are not family businesses. You know, and it really is just able to permeate when you do have a family presence within the business and you see the same faces every single day. But at the end of the day, I really think it's about the CEO, you know, the president, really the top people at the company and the kind of culture that they want.
And how do you retain these good people? Jason?
I think it's
Peter?
important that they see a future. In a family business, there's usually a future because you have somebody who wants to perpetuate the company. So I think that's an important thing.
Do you give the people who are not family a piece of the business?
We don't. That's always a little bit tricky.
You know, to retain key employees, you have to do something. Okay, you know, salary. You know, not the survivor trip that you sent over there. Okay,
A little bit.
I mean,
Well, sure, you have to find ways to compensate them, but to your point, it's also about the work environment that you create, and by making them part of your organization and to feel like they're part of your family, we think creates a certain quality of life that's very attractive. And you know, we have a lot of people that have worked elsewhere, particularly people who've joined us in the last 15, 20 years. I mean, when my grandfather founded the business, he brought everybody in. We still have, and some of those people are still with us. And then, of course, as the years go on and as we grew, we needed to bring more outsiders in. And a lot of them have told us that this is, you know, it's just the most wonderful place to work and very, very different than their prior experience.
I mean,
there's a psychic benefit
There are
to
very
that.
few companies that have an entrance on Broadway, you know, but that's the personality of the business, you know.
Yes.
That's what people wanted, you know. It's like a lifestyle. You're celebrating what 108 years.
108 years, yeah.
108 years, and you're about what?
It changes every day, but we're about 80.
Yeah, I know it changes. It's not that good, okay. And you're
We're 75 this year.
75, and
Yeah.
you're 75. No. Okay. But how hard is it for the next generation, for these people to transfer their business? How hard is it for them to be able to get the next generation involved? Because how old is your kids?
They're young. I mean,
Okay.
we still have a while to go with them.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
all
we
right.
don't have to make that decision
I think it's almost
yet.
geometric in terms of the difficulty. I mean, statistically, a business that's a family business, 35% find themselves surviving the next generation, and maybe roughly 12% the generation thereafter. Here you have businesses that have been around for a number of generations in a very healthy sort of way. Their children are going to have a lot of enrichments and a lot of opportunities and experiences, and some of them will find themselves wanting to join, and some of them will find themselves not. So the key will be, amongst other things, to have the kind of senior management that can perpetuate that company, the way in theory maybe a Ford Motor might have. Or
Right, but
Just to comment on that, I mean, thankfully, my father helped overcome that third generation, so that helps us a lot. I also think that real estate is actually probably has higher odds than that, because the nature of real estate is that you can build on it. There's some economies of scale, there's some critical mass.
I would normally agree with you, but unfortunately, when I look at the real estate, and I'm so happy that I brought different trades today, and a number of them did go to the third generation, but a number of them have difficulties retaining some of their third generation that you and I know of. And to go to the fourth generation is very
Well, one thing that was helpful in my family is that my great-grandfather had 6 sons, and they all really went their own different ways.
Right, they didn't go.
So
they created. There was the other.
So
the other Musk.
but a lot.
development
But
company.
it was you know, a difficult thing in those days to have so many people in one business. So they had to separate. There just wasn't enough profit to go around for them. So, but I think that in real estate, you know, it's a little bit of a different situation than other businesses.
But
I think it's helpful.
Right, but I think, as you say, real estate is a different type of business. In your business, if you weren't, you know, if this was still a true family business, and they would say, you know, I remember, because retail, I believe, is the hardest family business to continue with, because, you know, as I said, I did the show on the life of Mark Russ Fetterman last week, you know, and he basically said, you know, I wanted my son, who's an oncologist, to work in the in Russ and Daughters to cut locks. He wanted it over there, you know, and when the retail, you got to work, you know, the holidays, he's on vacation, you know, you got to work over there. I mean, I was a cashier at 11 o'clock at night on 13th Avenue because my father had a drugstore at Lanes. You know, it's a different thing. I think each business is a different type.
I've seen a number of companies where they've kind of, if you will, forced the next generation to join, the way you maybe are describing, and it's usually been fatal to the business over long periods of time, because the person's heart isn't there, the passion isn't there, their values might be very different, their experiences for sure are, and a business has to be loved. I mean, and has, in order for it to go forward, you have to have a passion for it.
Do you think, with regard to that, your father was involved with the business from the beginning? Your cousins, your uncle wasn't involved with the business. Ken's uncle was, he was an attorney somewhere else. Okay.
Right.
Do you see that cousins and family businesses, you know, where the relatives are not always involved, or a different type?
No, not really. I think that, you know, in our business, no, I don't think anybody was really forced to go into the business. People
I'm not saying
wanted
forced.
to join. They were drawn to it for a variety of reasons. And all of us, you know, my grandfather was a very strong personality. Even though we didn't grow up, well, and even though we didn't necessarily grow up working in the business, we were very much aware of sort of the place our family had within the financial community in New York, and the reputation we had. And that was important to us. It was part of our identity growing up. And I think having the opportunity to come into the business and to understand, to be a part of that
I
was
think that's really important. I think you're very proud of what your father and the family tradition, and I know that's the way the Musses are. You know, this proud tradition, you know, that you want to keep that business. And you know, I remember my late father-in-law, he had a son in the business, and I knew my kids would never go into the business. They had no desire whatsoever. It's very difficult to continue a generation.
It's very hard. It's very hard to come home as a child and listen to your parent or parents either arguing or discussing how bad life is because of the shop, and then say, I'm going to grow up, go to law school, medical school, dental school, and then go into that business. So there has to be a real respect for the business, for the experiences that they're hearing, for the legacy story.
So why do they go into a family business?
Well, because here I'm hearing very positive things. I'm hearing.
We wouldn't be sitting here if
Yeah,
we
that's
were
right.
miserable. We probably would have declined the invitation.
Otherwise, I would have had the psychiatric ward. No, but why do people go into family business?
Well, for one, there's a sense of control of your own destiny, a real passion to do those things that you really want to do. Sometimes it's emotional identity. We knew you were known in the community, or you know. There's a thought process, a creativity that you can allow yourself to really nurture. There's, in some cases, the ability to, as long as you are getting along and aligned with your partners, if they are, or family, the ability to go forward in almost any way you want, not, if you will, needing to deal with a large national or international firm that might have different values or perspectives.
So, do you? I mean, it may be too early or premature because of the age of the kids, and you don't have children, and your children are young. Do you see, with your siblings, with your cousins, and with your brothers and sisters, do you think there will be, hopefully, and that's why it's so great that I really have three fourth generations continuing in this thing, to the next generation?
Who knows?
No, I know,
don't
but
know.
would you like it to?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean,
But you wouldn't. But in a way, you wouldn't force the same way that your dad didn't force you.
I don't think that's
you know,
productive at all.
I think if you force, I think you could end up actually hurting the business.
Otherwise we'd have the journalism over here. You know. Okay. Okay.
Well, yeah, I guess there's forcing and there's encouraging. You could
That's it.
gently encourage.
I wish I had more time, but I don't. And I'd really like to thank the generations to show me that, you know, businesses continue and thrive as long as you have good family relationships and good teams. And I'd like to thank Jason Muss, Dan Glickberg, Peter Rosenthal, and Paul Rich.
Thank
and I'll
you.
see you next week.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.